The court clerk handed me the certified copy of the judgment, my brother's name printed in stark black ink right next to the amount, $450,000. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was vindication, a heavy, solid confirmation that the past 2 years of hell had finally led to justice. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a time when my biggest worry was a 12-hour shift on the oncology ward. My life was a meticulously organized cycle of scrubs, antiseptic hand soap, and the constant low-humming anxiety of beeping machines. I was a nurse, not the kind you see on TV, all drama and doctors, lounge romances. I was the kind who held a basin for a patient retching from chemo, who changed soiled bedsheets without flinching, and who learned to read the language of a family's silent terror in the lines around their eyes. My day started before sunrise, the drive to the hospital a quiet, dark ritual. I'd clock in, get the report from the night shift, and begin my rounds. My world was a landscape of IV drips, medication schedules, and charting, so much charting. But in between, the clinical tasks were the moments that kept me going. It was propping up Mrs. Gable with an extra pillow so she could see the birds at the feeder outside her window. It was listening to Mr. Henderson's stories about his time in the Navy for the 10th time, because telling them made him feel like he was more than just the cancer devouring him from the inside. Dedication wasn't a choice, it was a reflex. It was staying an hour past my shift to help a new nurse start a difficult IV, because I remembered how terrifying it was to be new. It was coming home to my small, quiet apartment, the scent of the hospital clinging to my hair, and eating a microwave dinner for one while scrolling through pictures of my friends, kids, and their beach vacations. My life wasn't glamorous, I wasn't getting rich. But it had purpose. I was helping people. I was doing good. I foolishly believed that was the most important thing in the world, and I assumed everyone, especially my own family, operated on a similar moral compass. That's why I didn't see my brother Mark for what he was. He was my only sibling, older by 3 years, and possessed a charisma that could charm a snake out of its skin. Where I was steady and predictable, he was a whirlwind of get-rich-quick schemes and flashy, short-lived passions. He was always on the verge of his big break, a break that was perpetually just around the corner. I remember one particular Tuesday, I was halfway through my shift and finally had a moment to sit down in the break room, my feet throbbing inside my sneakers. My phone buzzed on the table. It was him. "Hey, Sarah Bear, how's my favorite frontline hero?" he chirped, his voice smooth as silk. I managed a tired smile, leaning my head back against the cool cinder block wall. "Hey, Mark, just on break. It's a day." "I bet. You work too hard. You know that? Seriously. While you're in there saving the world, I'm out here trying to conquer it." He laughed, a practiced, easy sound. "Listen, I was just calling to check in. I was driving past Grandma Rose's old neighborhood today, and it got me thinking about her." A pang of grief, still sharp even after a year, hit me. "Oh, yeah, I miss her." Me too, he said, his tone softening into a performance of sympathy, which is why I was thinking that house. It's a lot, isn't it? For you to worry about on top of everything else. The upkeep, the property taxes, all those memories. It must be a heavy burden. I frowned, confused. Our grandmother's will had been simple and clear. The house was to be left to both of us, jointly. The understanding, the one we had discussed with her before she passed, was that we would keep it in the family. It was our only real inheritance, the place where we'd spent every Christmas of our childhoods. "It's not a burden, Mark," I said slowly. "It's Grandma's house. I was planning to head over this weekend to mow the lawn." "See? That's what I mean," he exclaimed, his voice bright and helpful. "You're working 60 hours a week and then you have to go do yard work. It's not right. You should be resting, enjoying your life. All I'm saying is, maybe we should think about what's best for you." I was too exhausted to dissect the subtle poison in his words, the way he framed his concern around my well-being, painting the house as a problem instead of a gift. I just heard a brother pretending to care. "I'm fine, Mark." "Really?" I said, my pager beeping insistently. "Shoot, I have to go." "Room 204's pump is acting up." Okay, go save a life," he said, his charm clicking back into place. "Just think about what I said. For your sake. We'll talk soon." I hung up, shaking my head at his misplaced concern. I thought he was just being typical Mark, all big talk and half-baked ideas. I never imagined that his casual, caring phone call was the first move in a calculated plan to steal our entire history from right under my feet. A week later, I met him at a sterile, trendy coffee shop downtown, the kind with exposed brick and baristas who looked like they were judging your life choices. I'd just come off a 10-hour shift, and the exhaustion was a physical weight on my shoulders. I still had my scrubs on under my jacket. Mark, on the other hand, was wearing a crisp button-down and a blazer, looking like he'd just stepped out of a magazine ad for men who disrupt industries. He flashed a brilliant white smile as I sat down, pushing a latte toward me. "For my favorite sister, you look beat." "It was a long day," I said, wrapping my cold hands around the warm mug. "So what's this about? You were so mysterious on the phone." "Mysterious is my middle name," he joked, then slid a sleek leather-bound folder across the polished concrete table. "I solved our little problem, the house." I stiffened. "It's not a problem, Mark." "Semantics," he waved a dismissive hand. "Look, I know you're attached, but I've been doing some thinking. And some doing. I found a buyer. A developer. They're offering $900,000. Cash. We sign, and in 30 days, the money is in our account. No more property taxes, no more mowing the lawn on your one day off. We're free." My head swam. $900,000. The number was astronomical, unreal. My share, $450, was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. It was enough to pay off my nursing school loans, put a down payment on a place of my own, maybe even take one of those beach vacations I was always scrolling past. For a dizzying second, the idea was intoxicating. But then the image of Grandma Rose's garden, of the notch on the kitchen door frame marking our heights, flooded my mind. "Mark, we promised Grandma we'd keep it," I said, my voice small. "Grandma would want us to be happy and successful, not tied down to a dusty old house," he said smoothly, opening the folder. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime offer, Sarah. It's a gift. All you have to do is sign right here." He pushed a pen into my hand, pointing to a signature line on a thick stack of documents. Something in his eagerness set my teeth on edge. The same instinct that told me when a patient's vitals were about to crash was screaming at me now. "Let me read it first," I said, pulling the folder closer. "It's just standard boilerplate, a purchase and sale agreement," he said, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "I had my lawyer look it over. It's solid." But I wasn't listening. My eyes scanned the legalese, the words blurring together, until I landed on a separate form tucked beneath the main agreement. It was a quitclaim deed. My name was listed as the grantor, and his was listed as the grantee. It was a legal document transferring my half of the ownership of the property to him, for the sum of $1. I looked from the paper to his smiling, expectant face. The air in my lungs turned to ice. "Mark," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "This form, it says I'm signing my share of the house over to you, the entire thing." His smile didn't falter. "It's a formality. It just streamlines the closing process if the title is in one name. The money will go into a holding account, and then we'll split it. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." "Which account?" I asked, my blood running cold. I flipped through the pages until I found the disbursement instructions. There was only one account listed, his. I looked up at him, and the entire coffee shop seemed to fade away. It was just me and him, and the chasm that had just opened between us. "It's all going to you, Mark. Every penny. Where's my half?" The charm finally cracked. The smile vanished, replaced by a sneer of such profound contempt it knocked the breath out of me. "Your half?" he scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "What exactly have you done to earn it? You spend your life changing bedpans and taking orders for a salary that barely covers your rent. You have no ambition, no vision." He gestured at the papers, at the life-altering sum printed on them. What would you even do with this money, Sarah? Pay off your loans? Buy a sensible sedan? This is generational wealth in the right hands. My hands. I can turn this into 10 million. I can build something. You just squander it on being comfortable. The words hit me like physical blows. My life, my work, the purpose I held so dear, he saw it all as worthless. It was Grandma's gift, I whispered, my throat tight with unshed tears. To both of us. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Grandma was a sweet old lady who didn't understand the real world. This money is wasted on you. He leaned forward, his eyes hard and cruel. You don't deserve it. That was the moment my heart broke, not with sadness, but with a clean, sharp crack of fury. The brother I knew was gone, replaced by this cold, greedy stranger. It was like the world went silent. And if you're just finding my story and want to hear how I fought back from this exact moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this was the injustice that started it all. He stood up, adjusting his blazer. Think about it, Sarah, but not for too long. He tossed a $20 bill on the table to cover our coffees. I'm moving forward with or without you. He walked out, leaving me alone in the bustling cafe with a stack of papers that represented the theft of my past and my future, and the echo of his words ringing in my ears, you don't deserve it. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of disbelief. At work, I went through the motions, a ghost in scrubs. I flushed IV lines, documented vitals, and offered weak smiles to my patients. But my mind was stuck in that coffee shop, replaying Mark's sneer over and over. The stack of papers he'd left me sat on my kitchen counter, a monument to his betrayal. Every time I walked past it, a fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. This couldn't be it. This couldn't be how our family story ended. There had to be a piece of the old Mark left, the big brother who taught me how to ride a bike and who once punched a bully for stealing my lunch money. I had to try one more time. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I rehearsed my opening line, trying to sound calm and reasonable, not like the hollowed-out shell of a woman I'd become. He answered on the third ring, his voice clipped and impatient. What? Mark, it's me, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. I need you to listen, please, just for a minute. A heavy sigh came through the phone. I'm busy, Sarah. I already told you my position. I know, but you're not thinking clearly, I pleaded, pacing the worn linoleum of my kitchen. That quitclaim deed. It's a legal document, Mark. It's not a formality. It gives you my entire inheritance, our inheritance. Did you even think about what that means? About what Grandma wanted? I clutched the phone tighter, my knuckles white. She left us that house so we would always have a piece of our history, a place to come back to. She trusted us to honor that, to honor each other. I paused, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a sign that I was reaching him. This isn't about the money, not really. It's about us. You're my brother. We're all the family we have left. Don't throw that away for this. We can figure out a fair way to handle this. Together, we can hire a neutral lawyer, set up a joint account. We can do this the right way. Silence. For a moment, a wild, desperate hope flared in my chest. Maybe he was considering it. Maybe the brother I knew was still in there. Then he laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a cold, condescending bark of air that cut right through me. Oh, Sarah. He chuckled, the sound dripping with pity and derision. You really are a piece of work. The right way? You mean your way? The small, safe, and stupid way? He went on, his voice a venomous purr. Let me explain this to you one last time, in words simple enough for you to understand. Grandma is dead. Her sentimental wishes are irrelevant. And us? There is no us in business, Sarah. There are assets and there are liabilities. You, with your bleeding heart and your paycheck-to-paycheck morality, are a liability. I'm not throwing our family away. I'm trimming the fat. I'm making the hard decision you're too weak to make. The hope in my chest died, turning to ash. "I'm moving forward," he said, his tone turning to steel. "The developer's offer is on the table. You can sign the papers, and maybe I'll throw you a few grand for being cooperative. Or you can refuse, and I'll force a partition sale through the courts. You'll get even less, and you'll have to pay your own legal fees. The choice is yours. But either way, I am getting that house." He didn't even say goodbye. The line just went dead. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The silence that followed was an abyss. It was in that moment that the floor fell away. All the strength I used to get through my shifts, all the compassion I poured into my patients, all the resilience I thought I possessed, it all evaporated. I was nothing. My legs gave out and I slid down the kitchen cabinets to the floor, my back hitting the wood with a dull thud. He was right. He had to be. Look at me, sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment that smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant and microwave noodles. My greatest ambition was to pay off my student loans. I owned nothing but a 10-year-old car and a collection of comfortable shoes. He was the one with the vision, the blazers, the confidence. I was just the help. The bedpan changer. "You don't deserve it." His words echoed in the cavern of my mind, and for the first time, I believed them. Who was I to think I deserved a windfall? Wealth was for people like Mark, people who knew how to wield it, who weren't afraid to break things, or people to get it. I was just Sarah, the good daughter, the responsible sister, the dependable nurse, a fool, a complete and utter fool who believed in things like fairness and family. The house, the money, the memory of my grandmother. It was all being stripped away, and I was too small, too weak, too worthless to stop it. I wrapped my arms around my knees, buried my face, and for the first time since he'd laid his trap, I let myself break. I don't know how long I sat on that cold linoleum, curled into a ball of my own making. An hour? 2? Time had dissolved into a thick gray sludge of self-loathing. Mark's words were a corrosive acid, eating away at the foundations of who I thought I was. Liability, small, weak, you don't deserve it. The sobs had subsided, leaving me hollowed out, a brittle shell. The fight was gone. He'd won. He'd taken my brother, my grandmother's house, and now my own self-worth. It was the beeping of the microwave that finally pulled me from the depths. I'd put my dinner in before his call and never taken it out. The blinking *000 was an accusation. My gaze drifted around my tiny kitchen, past the stack of his treacherous papers, to the magnet on my fridge. It was a cheap, plastic thing, a cartoon nurse with a goofy smile, a gift from a patient's 5-year-old daughter. "For taking care of my mommy," the little girl had said, pressing it into my palm with sticky fingers. I looked at my hands, calloused from work, but clean. These were the hands that started IVs, that held other hands through painful procedures, that had gently closed the eyes of the dying. They were the hands of a person who showed up, a person who did the hard, unglamorous work because it mattered. Mark saw a bedpan changer, but Mrs. Gable's family saw the person who helped their mother die with dignity. Mr. Henderson's son saw the nurse who listened to his father's stories when no one else had the time. A spark ignited in the frozen emptiness of my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something quieter, deeper. It was defiance. He did not get to define me. He did not get to decide what my life was worth. I had built a life of purpose, one patient, one 12-hour shift at a time. It wasn't flashy or ambitious in the way he understood, but it was real, and it was mine. I pushed myself up, my joints cracking in protest. I wasn't a liability. I was a goddamn frontline hero, just like he'd said in that first treacherous phone call. And he had forgotten who he was dealing with. I didn't back down from a challenge. I ran toward it. My keys were in my hand before I'd even fully formed the plan. I drove through the dark streets, not to my quiet apartment, but toward the one place that held the truth, Grandma Rose's house. Pulling into the driveway, the house stood silhouetted against the moon, a silent witness to our entire lives. This wasn't just a dusty old house. It was our history. and I wasn't going to let him burn it down for cash. Inside, the air was still and smelled of potpourri and old books. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. A sign. A memory. Anything. I ended up in her small office, a room I'd barely entered as a child. It was neat and orderly, just like her. On the bottom shelf of her bookshelf sat a heavy, fireproof lockbox. I remembered her telling me once, "Everything important is in here, Sarah. Everything you need to know." The key, as always, was hidden in a hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the box. Inside were birth certificates, old savings bonds, and a thick manila envelope labeled Last Will and Testament. I pulled out the formal, attorney-drafted document. It said what I already knew. The property at 124 Willow Creek Lane was left jointly to her 2 grandchildren, Sarah and Mark. It was the legal basis for his threat of a partition sale. For a second, my heart sank. But tucked behind the will was another envelope, smaller and made of thick, cream-colored stationery. My name and Mark's were written on the front in our grandmother's elegant, spidery cursive. It was sealed with a drop of wax. I broke the seal with my thumb. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Sarah and Mark," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, but I trust you are taking care of each other. This house has been our family's heart for 50 years. It is more than wood and nails. It is a sanctuary. It is my final gift to you both, a place to anchor you in the world, together. I have left it to you jointly, trusting you will honor its legacy. But I was not born yesterday. I know that life can pull people in different directions, and that money can whisper terrible, convincing lies." My breath caught in my throat. It was like she was speaking directly to me, from across the veil. "So I have added this codicil, written in my own hand, to be legally binding. It is my final word on the matter. I want this house to remain a home, a refuge for my bloodline. It is not to be treated as a simple asset for liquidation. Therefore, let it be known, should either of you attempt to force the sale of this property against the express wishes of the other, the party wishing to sell shall forfeit their claim, and their half share of the title shall pass to the sibling who wishes to keep our home as their own, for the symbolic sum of $1 paid to my estate." I read the sentence again and again. The words burned themselves into my brain. Forfeit their claim, pass to the sibling, for the symbolic sum of $1. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a surgeon who has just found the precise location of a tumor. Mark, with his slick lawyer and his quitclaim deed, had tried to steal my birthright for a single dollar. He had no idea that our grandmother, in her quiet, steadfast wisdom, had laid the perfect trap for his greed. He hadn't just made a move against me. He had violated the sacred, legally binding terms of her will. I folded the letter, my hands perfectly steady. The despair was gone, burned away by a cold, righteous fury. He thought I was weak. He thought I was a liability. He was about to find out how wrong he was. He had brought the fight to me, but I was holding the weapon, and it was loaded. The drive home from Grandma's house was a study in controlled fury. The old Sarah, the one who cried on the kitchen floor, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone forged in the fire of betrayal and armed with the sharp, beautiful clarity of a righteous cause. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my mind a whirring machine, processing, planning. My nursing instincts had kicked in, but this wasn't a medical emergency. It was a tactical one. Triage, stabilize, execute. The first step was to secure the weapon. Back in my apartment, I laid the handwritten codicil on my kitchen table under the bright glare of the overhead light. I handled it with the same care I would a fragile newborn. Using my phone, I took high-resolution photographs of the letter from every angle, capturing the elegant cursive, my grandmother's signature, the wax seal I had broken. I did the same with the formal will. Documentation. It was the bedrock of my profession. If you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. I placed the original documents back in their cream-colored envelope, drove them to a 24-hour bank, and sealed them in a newly rented safe deposit box. The copies I uploaded to a secure cloud server. The evidence was now preserved and untouchable. The next morning, I called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 3 years. My mission was too important. I spent hours researching probate and real estate attorneys, cross-referencing reviews, looking for a shark. I found one not in a glittering downtown skyscraper, but in a modest office park 20 minutes away. His name was Arthur Davies, and his website was filled with testimonials from clients he'd helped in David versus Goliath cases. His motto was simple: the facts don't care about feelings or bullies. I sat across from him an hour later, my document copies laid out on his mahogany desk. He was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes that didn't match his reputation as a bulldog. He listened patiently, his face unreadable, as I told him the whole sordid story: the coffee shop, the quitclaim deed, the phone call where Mark called me a liability. When I finished, I pushed the copy of the handwritten codicil toward him. He picked it up, adjusted his reading glasses, and read it once. Then he read it again, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the exact same smile I'd felt on my own face the night before, the smile of a surgeon finding a tumor. "Well, Miss Collins," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "your grandmother was one hell of a woman." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Your brother's threat to force a partition sale is the very trigger she describes. His attempt to have you sign that quitclaim deed, while not strictly triggering the clause itself, establishes a clear pattern of intent. He's not just in breach of your grandmother's wishes. He's legally impaled himself on them." He tapped the paper. "This is an ironclad, self-executing consequence. He made his move, and in doing so, he forfeited his entire claim. The house is yours." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me washed through my body. "So what do we do?" "We play his game, but with our rules," Mr. Davies said, his eyes glinting. "He thinks he's about to close a deal. We'll let him think that. It will make this all the sweeter. I will file an emergency petition with the probate court to enforce the codicil and a lis pendens on the property, which is a notice that will make it impossible for him to sell. But for any of this to work, he can't know it's coming. He needs to believe you've broken." That night, I made the hardest phone call of my life. I rehearsed the tremble in my voice, channeling the broken woman I'd been just 2 days prior. He answered with an arrogant, "Yeah?" "Mark, it's me," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "You were right. You were right about everything." I could almost hear him preen through the phone. "I know I was. So you're finally ready to be smart?" "Yes," I said, squeezing my eyes shut. "I'll sign. Just send me the papers. I'll sign them." "Good girl," he said, the condescension dripping from every word. "See how easy that was? I'll have my lawyer courier them to you tomorrow. The developer is getting impatient." There was a pause, and then he let out a low chuckle. "Don't worry, Sarah Bear. Once I turn this into a real fortune, maybe I'll buy you a new sensible sedan." He hung up, and I stood in the silence, my performance fading as a cold, hard resolve took its place. The courier arrived the next day with a fresh copy of the quitclaim deed. I let the package sit on my counter, unopened. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. He was at a steakhouse, the clink of glasses and loud chatter in the background. He was celebrating. "Just wanted to give you one last chance to tell me how brilliant I am," he gloated, his words slightly slurred. "The papers are signed. The funds are clearing escrow next week. $90,000, Sarah. Can you even picture that much money? Of course you can't. Don't worry, I'll handle it. I'm thinking tech startups, maybe a little crypto. You stick to your bedpans. It's what you're good at." I listened to him mock my life, my career, my very existence. I heard every single word. And while the man who used to be my brother laughed on the other end of the line, convinced of his absolute victory, I looked at the legal notice from Mr. Davies on my counter. It confirmed that the petition had been filed, the hearing was set, the trap was sprung. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. The day of the hearing, I wore a simple black dress and my most comfortable, sensible shoes. I looked like a nurse on her day off, which was exactly what I was. I sat on the hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, my hands clasped in my lap, my posture as straight as a spine board. I wasn't nervous. The frantic energy of the past weeks had condensed into a single, dense point of calm in my chest. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a procedure, an extraction. Mr. Davies sat beside me, quietly reviewing his notes, the picture of professional calm. Mark arrived 10 minutes late, of course. He strode down the marble hallway as if he owned it, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his phone pressed to his ear. He was laughing, closing a deal, or charming an investor. He didn't even see me until he was right in front of us. "Oh, for God's sake," he said, ending his call without a goodbye. He looked down at me, his lip curling in a familiar sneer. "Are you really going through with this pathetic little stunt, Sarah? My lawyer says the judge will throw this out in 5 minutes. You're just wasting everyone's time and, more importantly, my money." I didn't answer. I just looked at him, my expression as flat and unreadable as a patient's chart. My silence seemed to irritate him more than any argument could have. He huffed, adjusted his silk tie, and stalked into the courtroom. Inside, the room was cold and smelled of old paper and floor wax. We took our places. Mark sat with his expensive lawyer, drumming his fingers on the polished table, radiating impatience. He looked at the judge, a stern-faced woman with hair pulled back in a severe bun, as if she were a slow-moving teller at the bank. The proceedings began. Mark's lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth and dismissive. He painted me as an emotional, irrational sister standing in the way of a lucrative and sensible business transaction, filing a frivolous petition out of petty jealousy. Mark nodded along, looking vindicated. Then it was Mr. Davies's turn. He stood, his demeanor humble but his voice firm. "Your Honor, this is not about emotion. It is about the explicit, legally binding instructions of the deceased, Rose Collins." He presented the formal will. "As you can see, the property was left jointly to my client, Sarah Collins, and her brother, Mark Collins." Mark's lawyer smirked. "As we've stipulated, Your Honor, this is the basis for a partition sale, which my client is entitled to pursue." "Ordinarily, yes," Mr. Davies said, his voice dropping slightly, commanding the room's attention. However, the will was not the entirety of Mrs. Collins's final instructions. He walked to the clerk and handed her a document in a protective plastic sleeve. "We present into evidence a handwritten codicil, signed and dated by Rose Collins, found sealed with her last will and testament." The clerk handed it to the judge. Mark leaned forward, squinting, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. The judge put on her glasses and began to read. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the rustle of the paper in her hands. Then she read it aloud. "Should either of you attempt to force the sale of this property against the express wishes of the other, the party wishing to sell shall forfeit their claim, and their half share of the title shall pass to the sibling who wishes to keep our home as their own, for the symbolic sum of $1. The moment the words left the judge's lips, every drop of color drained from Mark's face. His arrogant posture collapsed. He stared at the judge, then at me, his mouth hanging slightly open. The gears were turning, the catastrophic math clicking into place in his head. The $900,000 deal, the partition sale he'd threatened me with, the quitclaim deed he'd tried to trick me into signing. It wasn't just a breach of trust. It was the trigger. He had pulled it himself. "Your Honor," his lawyer stammered, scrambling to his feet. "This document it's questionable." "It is signed, dated, and its placement with the will indicates clear testamentary intent," the judge said, her voice like chipping ice. She looked down at Mark, her gaze withering. "Mr. Collins, you threatened your sister with the partition sale, did you not? You initiated an agreement with the developer to liquidate the asset against her express wishes, is that correct?" Mark couldn't speak. He just stared, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "The language of the codicil is clear and self-executing," the judge declared, her voice ringing with finality. "By attempting to force the sale, you triggered the forfeiture clause. This court has no choice but to uphold the final, binding wishes of the testator." She picked up her gavel. "The petition is granted. Title to the property at 124 Willow Creek Lane is to be transferred in its entirety to Sarah Collins. Mr. Collins has forfeited his claim. The gavel came down with a sharp, definitive crack that echoed through the silent room. For a second, Mark just sat there, frozen. Then a choked, guttural sound escaped his throat. "No, no!" He shot to his feet, knocking his chair over. "That's not possible! The deal is closing! The money! $900,000! He pointed a trembling finger at me. "She did this! She tricked me!" The bailiff took a step toward him. "Sir! It's my money!" he shrieked, his voice cracking, the carefully constructed facade of the successful businessman shattering into a million pieces. He looked like a wild animal caught in a trap, his eyes darting around in raw animal panic. He looked at me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You! You think you're so smart? You're nothing. You're a bedpan changer. You don't deserve it." I stood up slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I walked to the clerk's window to receive the certified copy of the judgment. I held the paper in my hand, the ink still fresh. Then I turned to face him, the brother who had tried to erase me. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the room. "I am a nurse, and we have a name for people like you. A liability. I'm just trimming the fat." I turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him to choke on the ashes of his own greed. I didn't wait for the bailiff to drag him out. I simply took my certified copy of the judgment, gave Mr. Davies a firm, grateful nod, and walked out into the echoing marble hallway. The paper in my hand felt heavier than it looked, each word a lead weight, the judge's final crack of the gavel still ringing in my bones. I was free. The courtroom doors burst open behind me. "Sarah!" I stopped, but didn't turn. I heard his frantic footsteps, the scuff of his expensive Italian leather shoes on the polished floor. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, desperate. "Sarah, wait. Please." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up into his face. The mask was gone. The sneering, confident predator had been replaced by a wild-eyed, cornered animal. His face was pale and slick with sweat, his tailored suit suddenly looking like a costume he was drowning in. "You have to fix this," he rasped, his voice a ragged whisper. "Sarah Bear, please. You have to tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding." The old pet name, once a term of affection, was now a foul taste in my mouth. I pulled my arm from his grasp, my movement slow and deliberate. "There was no misunderstanding, Mark. You were very clear about what you wanted." "No, you don't get it," he hissed, glancing around the hallway as if the walls were closing in. "The developer, my partners, this was the seed money for everything. You haven't just taken the house, you've ruined me." For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd come crying to Mom when he'd broken a toy. But that little boy was long dead. This man had tried to burn my life down for profit and hadn't even blinked. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" he pleaded, his tone shifting, trying to find a new angle. "To see me fail? Fine, you win. You get the house. We can still make the sale. We'll split the money, 90-10. No, 80-20. Just give me something. You can't leave me with nothing." A laugh escaped my lips. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was cold and sharp and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. "Give you something?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You tried to steal my home, my history, and my inheritance for the price of a cup of coffee. You told me I deserved nothing. And the funny thing is, the court agreed with you." His face crumpled in confusion. "What?" "No, the judge sided with you." I held up the judgment, the paper a stark white shield between us. "The judge ruled that you forfeited your claim. She also ruled on the financial consequences of that action. This isn't a game anymore, Mark. This isn't a family squabble we can talk through. This is the end of a lawsuit." I took a step closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. He flinched, but I held his gaze. I wanted him to see that the woman he called weak was gone forever. "The judge has ruled," I said, my voice as hard and unforgiving as the marble floor. The sale to the developer will proceed. The full $900,000 will be placed in escrow. My half will be dispersed to me. Your half will also be dispersed to me. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. He looked like one of my patients just after receiving a terminal diagnosis. "No," he whispered. "No, that's everything." "Yes," I said. "It is. It's called damages, Mark, for breach of fiduciary duty, for trying to defraud your own sister. The court decided that since you tried to steal my $450,000, the only appropriate remedy was for you to pay it back. From the only assets you have." He stared at me, his mind finally processing the totality of his ruin. He had orchestrated a $900,000 deal and was about to walk away with absolutely nothing but debt and a shattered reputation. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, pressing my advantage, enjoying the power of dictating terms to the man who thought me worthless. "You are going to sign whatever papers the escrow company and the court require to facilitate that transfer. If you refuse, if you delay, if you so much as breathe in a way that I find uncooperative, I will have Mr. Davies file the liens. The judgment is for $450,000. Pay me, or the sheriff seizes your assets, your car, your bank accounts, whatever you have left. Is that simple enough for you to understand?" He just stood there, swaying slightly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The bully was gone. The charmer was gone. All that was left was the hollowed-out shell of a greedy, broken man. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. "This isn't a negotiation. This is your severance." I turned and walked away, my sensible shoes making no sound on the cold floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel his stare on my back, the silent, burning weight of his complete and utter defeat. The week after the hearing was a blur of paperwork. Escrow documents, transfer authorizations, final deeds. Mark signed everything without a word. His expensive lawyer had been replaced by a court-appointed one who looked as tired as I used to feel after a double shift. My brother, the man who wanted to conquer the world, had been reduced to a signature on a series of documents that systematically dismantled his life. I never saw him again. The check from the escrow company wasn't handed to me by a clerk. It arrived as a wire transfer notification on my phone, $900,000. My half and his, which the court had awarded me as damages. Seeing the number in my bank account didn't feel like winning the lottery. It felt like the final, definitive closing of a wound. I heard about Mark, of course. Whispers travel. His partners in the next big thing dropped him the second the deal fell through, and the judgment became public. His flashy car was repossessed. He lost his downtown loft. The last I heard, he'd moved somewhere to the Midwest, working a commission-only sales job, chasing the next big break that would always be just around the corner. He had built his entire identity on the performance of success, and when the money vanished, so did he. He wasn't a monster. He was just a ghost, a hollow man who had traded his soul for a price and then found he couldn't cover the bill. I didn't feel hatred for him anymore, or even anger. I just felt a quiet, profound pity. The money didn't turn me into a different person, it just made me more myself. The first thing I did was sit at my little kitchen table, open my laptop, and pay off the entirety of my nursing school loans. Clicking submit on that final payment felt like taking off a lead-lined vest I hadn't realized I'd been wearing for a decade. A weight lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. I didn't quit my job. My work was never just about the paycheck. It was about the purpose. But now, I go to my shifts with a lightness I've never known. I can pick up an extra shift because I want to, not because rent is due. I can afford to take a real vacation, a trip to the coast where I sat on the sand and watched the waves, the scent of salt in the air instead of antiseptic. I bought a small condo in a quiet neighborhood with a little balcony where I drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. It's not a mansion, it's a sanctuary. It's mine. Grandma Rose's house is still there, exactly as she left it. I go over on weekends, not to mow the lawn as a chore, but to tend her garden as a privilege. I sit in her office, the fireproof box now holding the deed with my name on it. and I feel her quiet, steady presence. She didn't just leave me a house or money. She left me a weapon to defend myself, trusting I would know how to use it when the time came. My brother thought my compassion was a weakness. He was wrong. It's the source of my strength. It's what allows me to see people for who they are, to understand their pain, and to know when to hold a hand and when to fight back with everything I have. He saw a bedpan changer, a liability. He failed to see the person who runs toward the fire, who charts the facts, and who never, ever gives up on a patient. He was my patient, in a way, and the diagnosis was terminal greed. I couldn't save him, but I did save myself. This whole ordeal, from that coffee shop to the courtroom, taught me that your worth isn't determined by your bank account or your job title, but by the spine you build for yourself, one right decision at a time. If this story resonated with you, and you want to see more about navigating life's battles and finding your own strength, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.